In August 1874, in a valley in Colorado, USA, a man who was an illustrator smelled something very vomit-inducing. But he followed the smell and found the lifeless bodies of 5 men. Each body was in a different state of decomposition, with some bodies being gnawed and digested by animals to the point that only bones remained. Some bodies were rotting, and another body looked like it was the last to die because it was not very decomposed and still looked alive. But each body looked like it had some flesh and some pieces taken away. So what happened? Who took it? And why are they here? So, without further ado, let's find out the answer, with the story that Just a Story brings you today. Alfred Packer, the Colorado Cannibal. The story begins on April 16, 1874, at the Los Pinos Indian Agency, near Saguache, Colorado. As the agent sat eating in the dining room, the door opened and a man appeared. The man had a rifle, a knife, a steel coffee pot, and a satchel, and rags wrapped around his feet. The man rushed forward as he saw the food the agent was eating and began to eat ravenously. The agent did not question him, as he probably had not eaten in several days. After he finished eating, the man vomited up his meal. However, this could have simply been because his digestive system was not used to eating so much food after such a long period of time. When he was finished, the man introduced himself as Alfred Packer. Let's get to know Packer before we continue. Alfred Greiner Packer was born on January 21, 1842, in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. As a child, Packer had a poor relationship with his parents, and as a teenager, he moved to Minnesota and worked as a shoemaker. In 1862, Packer enlisted in the military, but was discharged after he suffered epileptic seizures while on duty. He tried to re-enlist, but was again discharged. Packer worked at several jobs over the next 9 years, including as a hunter, wagon teamster, ranch hand, and field worker, guide. He ended up working mining-related jobs. Okay, back to the story. Packer told the agent his story of how he came to be alone and without food. He said that in November of 1873, a group of 20 men had heard of a gold strike in Breckenridge, Colorado. They formed a wagon train to go there, and Packer happened upon the group. Packer asked where they were headed, and when he learned they were going to mine for gold, Packer thought this might be his chance to finally strike it rich, and asked to join the group. However, Packer had no money or supplies, and the group was hesitant to take him along. But Packer claimed he was both a prospector and a guide, and that he knew the way to the gold fields. The group eventually agreed to let Packer join them. Shortly after they set out, the group was caught in a blizzard and lost their way. They began to run out of food, but were fortunate enough to come across a band of Native Americans. The chief of the tribe took pity on the group and gave them food and shelter. The chief advised them to delay their journey until spring, as the weather conditions were too dangerous to travel in. He said that no one traveled during the winter months, and that if they tried to continue, they would surely die. After staying with the tribe for 2 or 3 weeks, some of the men in the group became restless. They worried that they would miss out on the gold strike if they waited until spring, as miners from all over the country were heading to Breckenridge. The group held a meeting to discuss whether to continue their journey. It was decided that 10 of the men would stay with the tribe to look after the horses and wagons until spring, while the other 11 would press on. The chief advised them to follow the river, as it would be safer than traveling through the mountains. However, Packer convinced the group that they should take a shortcut through the mountains, claiming that it was a more direct route and they would reach Breckenridge sooner. 5 of the men agreed to let Packer lead them to Breckenridge. However, during the journey, they were caught in another blizzard. Packer suffered a seizure, and the group of 5 decided to abandon him as he was slowing them down. Before they left, one of the men, Israel Swan, gave Packer his rifle. The group left Packer to fend for himself with only a few bullets and almost no supplies. Packer survived by eating roots, rosebuds, and his own shoes, which he boiled in his steel coffee pot. After the agent listened to Packer's story, he found it odd that Packer did not appear to be emaciated, despite being lost in the wilderness for over 2 months. However, he did not question Packer about this. After staying at the agency for 10 days, Packer expressed a desire to return home to Pennsylvania. Before leaving, Packer sold his rifle to one of the agents for $10. He then headed to the nearby town of Saguache to purchase supplies for his journey. When Packer arrived in Saguache, he stayed at Dolan's saloon. The owner of the saloon, Larry Dolan, said that Packer spent about $100 during his stay, and that Packer even offered to lend him $300. Packer also spent money at other establishments in town. It was reported that Packer had several wallets full of money. Packer drank heavily and, when drunk, would tell stories about his experience of being left alone in the mountains. The stories he told were inconsistent, and he seemed to have an endless supply of money. While in Saguache, Packer drunk, encountered 3 members of the original party who remained at the tribe, at Dolan's saloon. One of the men, Preston Nutter, asked Packer what had happened to the other members of his party. Packer told him that they had made camp, and the other 5 men had gone out hunting. He said that Swan had given him his rifle, but that the other 5 men never returned. Nutter thought Packer's story was strange, considering that Packer appeared to be well-fed. He also questioned why anyone unfamiliar with Colorado would abandon their guide in the snowy mountains, in a territory that Packer claimed to know well. Nutter also found it odd that Swan would have given Packer his rifle, leaving the group with only one rifle to hunt with. He also noticed that Packer had several items that belonged to other members of the group. Nutter and the others began to distrust Packer. They confronted him, but were separated by others in the saloon. Meanwhile, at the Los Pinos Indian Agency, the 5 men who had followed the river route, as advised by the chief, arrived. The agent told them about the man named Alfred Packer, and relayed Packer's story to them. The 5 men did not believe Packer's story, and told the agent that Packer was not to be trusted, and that he should be brought in for questioning. Several of the agents traveled to Saguache to bring Packer back. They told Packer that he was needed to guide them to the missing men. Packer reluctantly returned to Los Pinos. After Packer arrived at Los Pinos, he was questioned. Nutter was also present, and asked Packer about the large amount of money he had. While Packer was being questioned, 2 Native Americans entered the agency with a piece of dried human flesh. Packer fainted at the sight of it. When he was revived, he begged for mercy, and said that he would confess everything. Packer told the agent that after he and his party left the Native Americans, they had supplies that they believed would last them for 14 days. However, they soon ran out of food, and the group began to eat roots, rosebuds, and rabbits. Eventually, they resorted to boiling their shoes and eating them. A few days later, the group split up to search for firewood and additional food. When Packer returned, he found that 4 of the men had shot down and cannibalized Israel Swan. Packer said that he did not know what to do, and that if he did not join the other 4, he would be the next one to be shot down and eaten. He agreed to join them in eating Swan's flesh. They found several $1,000s on Swan, which they divided among themselves, and then continued on their journey. They eventually became hungry again, and shot down and ate another member of the group and continued on journey, and then another, until only 2 men remained, Packer and a man named Shannon Wilson Bell. They agreed not to kill each other. But eventually Bell decided to shut down Packer and eat him. However, Packer was able to overpower Bell, and killed and ate him instead. Packer took all of the money and supplies, and said that human flesh has good taste, especially in the chest area. The member of the original party did not believe Packer's story, as Bell was known to be a man who would sacrifice his own life for others. The agent had Packer lead them to the scene of the crime, but they were unable to find any bodies. While they were returning, Packer attempted to kill one of the agents and was taken into custody. He was jailed in Saguache, and in August, the bodies of the 5 men were found by a sketch artist, as described in the introduction. A coroner was sent to the scene and found the bodies of 5 men. The first body was missing its head. The first and second bodies had been gnawed on by animals, leaving little and scattered bones. The third and fourth bodies were largely flayed torsos of rotting viscera, attached to skeletal legs, but with intact and bearded faces. They had received blows to the head, the shape indicating perhaps a hatchet, and their bodies had noticeable broken bones. The fifth body lay with largely skeletal legs splayed and arms to his sides that were crudely cut to their bones, leading to hands that were still fully skinned. His remaining corpse was a putrid mass of viscera encased in an almost wholly flayed torso, which led to an almost still living face, complete with a thick red beard and bushy hair. The lack of noticeable decay in his face suggested that he had been the last to die. The top of skull had been ripped open and his brains were lying on the ground beneath him. The condition of the bodies contradicted Packer's story immediately. If Packer's story were true, the bodies would have been scattered, as he claimed to have killed one man, traveled some distance, killed another man, traveled some more, and so on. Instead, all of the bodies were in the same location. The agent theorized that Packer had simply killed the men in order to rob them. The agent returned to Saguache to find Packer in jail, but Packer had escaped. Packer was eventually recaptured on March 11, 1883. He was initially sentenced to death, but after an appeal, Packer cited a lack of food as the cause of the incident. Packer's sentence was commuted to 40 years in prison, and died at the age of 65. So, what did you think of the story of Alfred Packer, the Colorado Cannibal? If you enjoyed this story, or if there is a particular story that you would like me to tell, please leave a comment below. Also, please consider subscribing to my channel so that you can be notified when I post new stories. For now, I bid you farewell. Bye-bye.